stay there if you
Okay.
like. All right, hopefully we are live. Are we live? Oh, we are live. Right, okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm in my sort of blues today, but not my proper blues.
It's more relaxed.
I
Might as
am
well be
more
in this
relaxed.
environment.
It's because I spent all day sat around in a linen shirt yesterday. It's not ironed. So I had more important things to do this morning than worry about whether my shirt was ironed or not. Yeah, so I'm in a hoodie, looking super professional. So, right, okay. So Carl's live. Hello, Carl. How are you doing? The dog chewing a Costa cup on the floor. So let's wait for a couple more people to pop on, and if not, we'll just start going through our subject matter for today. So today we are looking at provisions for the self-employed, and there's been huge amounts of controversy in. It was even watching it on the news this morning. People complaining about how the government has forgotten us poor poor unfortunate self-employed people. I don't think they've forgotten us at all. I think they just haven't got round to us in the great myriad of poo that we're currently in, and you know we just have to wait until we get round to us, basically, because there is just so much else to deal with. And obviously everybody saw what was going on yesterday, and people still doing crazy stuff and going out, and wanting to basically treating this time off as a holiday. And the government obviously had to step in and say, no, seriously, no means no. We mean don't go out, like don't go and see anybody, don't do anything. You're not allowed out of your houses. You're housebound. So I can understand how they're probably the self-employed are probably thinking that we're forgotten, and I don't think we are. I think we're well on their radar. And
It's just the self-employed is more complicated.
well,
That's what it
yes,
is.
yes,
Employees are relatively straightforward because you can see what they earn. The government can see what they earn. Self-employed much more tricky because it's variable, and there's so much range between different earners.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, we were
you're
talking about
bound to
yeah, we were talking about that before, weren't we, Harry? So if we look at some of our clients and the range of clients that we have, you have, people who earn 2,000 a month, and they might have savings and money put aside to be able to last them for 3 to 6 months, and compare that with someone who might earn 10 or 20,000 a month, or who might draw 10 or 20,000 pounds a month, and they're living on that. They've got big mortgages, they've got big houses, they've got big outgoings, they've got big, highly consumable cars, big insurance bills, busy lifestyles. And so what is fair from the government's perspective? How do you decide what is the right amount of money for each individual to have, to be able to get through the next 3 to 6 months, and just be able to get their lives back on track, be able to pay for their food and their necessities and their heat. So we are aware that there is a proposal to the bill. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you what I'm looking at online. So this is a proposal to a bill that's going to go through. In fact, this one isn't. This one is. This is a proposal to a bill that should hopefully be passed today, and the Secretary of State must include a scheme for statutory self-employment pay, and that applies to self-employed or freelancers. And payments are going to be made so that the net monthly earnings of an individual do not fall below 80% of their net monthly earnings averaged over the last 3 years, or £2,917 per month, whichever is lower. So I think that's actually quite generous, and it is a little more generous than the 2,500 they're capping paid workers, PAYE workers to. Um, Now, although it says 80% of their net monthly earnings average over the last 3 years, what we don't know is whether at the end of this tax year we'll have to declare that as gross wages to be taxed upon, or net wages, or whether we won't even have to declare it at all. It won't even appear on our tax returns. So I did wonder why this 2,917 was a very specific amount and was higher than the amount that they are going to give to employed PAYE workers. But either way, what this should say to the rest of us self-employed individuals, that the government is thinking about us. We are on their radar. This isn't approved yet, so these numbers could change, but this is what we're looking at the moment. So the question we have next is, how do we apply for it? Well, we don't know yet. I'm sure the government will be preparing a portal or some kind of claim mechanism that we can all log on and apply for. And I suspect it will be a pull process, so we would have to go and log on and apply for it in the same way that we would universal tax credits, or the same way they're proposing that furloughed staff are going to be recorded. Once an employer has decided that an employee is a furloughed member of staff, they would have to go and log on to a portal. Now, the portal is not ready yet, but it is coming. HMRC are working on it, and I expect this is exactly the same. There'll be a portal that we have to upload our details onto, and there'll be a portal where we have to say these are our net wages over the last X many years. Now, it shouldn't be too difficult for us as individuals to work out what our net wages are over the last few years. We've all submitted tax returns up to the end of the 18-19 tax year. Obviously, we've not done the 19-20 tax year yet, but we're so close to the end of the tax year, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we're expected to put our tax returns in to declare what our taxable income is over that period. Now, that is going to be easier for some than it is for others, but it certainly is a bit of an incentive for any of us who are generally a bit tardy in doing our tax returns to perhaps get all that information up to date and ready. And there are some people where the amount of net wages drawn per month is really easy to define. We know what that is. We know the drawings. We've got that recorded in the accounts. We know exactly what that is. There are going to be others where it's a combination of net earnings. It might be a combination of dividends, of directors' wages, of self-employed earnings, of, dividends from shares that are held. So it could be a combination of those. So at the moment, when we don't know quite how the government are going to calculate this and how we should be claiming our net monthly earnings, I do think we need to start getting all that information in order so that we know what it is. Now, most clients we deal with have a lot of that information in sort of spreadsheet form. They keep a track of it as they go along. So if that's not you, then you could easily do that. Take a look at your bank statements, take a look at your income. If you put it to one side and put it in a bank account, then that's great. If it's recorded separately in your business accounts, then that's great. Make sure you know what it is so that we can calculate and claim for this cash if and when you need it. Which brings me to another point, if and when you need it. There's been a lot said about the government not taking into account these poor, unfortunate, self-employed people. But actually, these poor, unfortunate, self-employed people, which is you and I, for the most part, have businesses that have funds in, have businesses that might continue to trade through the next 3 months. So we're panicking about having this money to claim, but maybe we don't need to. Carl says I have an amazing accountant who I have on my books ready to roll and up to date. Yes, you do, Carl. That's fantastic. So a lot of us might not even need to claim this money. If the focus were on continuing to run our business as usual and continuing to grow our businesses, and clients allowing, of course, allowing us to continue to generate the income, we won't need to make the claim on the government for emergency funds for statutory self-employed payment. So this really is only for those people whose income is going to have dried up and they literally can't feed their families, can't go out and buy food. So this will be support for them, not us necessarily.
Yeah, I would have thought
Anything
this would
like
be working the same way furlough staff and mortgage holidays. So it should be applied to those who are most in need. I can imagine they'll add many eligibility statements to this, but that's what I would imagine anyway.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment it says the scheme must make provisions for payments to be made out of public funds to individuals who are self-employed or freelancers. Now, if you look at the definition of self-employed on HMRC's website, self-employed is someone who's not on PAYE payroll and someone whose business is responsible for generating that person's income and they are responsible for that business. So it generally means, the self-employed who are not incorporated. However, if ever you have to apply for a mortgage or a loan or other state funding, you're genuinely or generally assumed and classed as being self-employed if you are a business owner and you're on minimum director's payroll and dividend. So you're not. There's almost no point in furloughing yourself as an employee if you're only on a director's payroll because you'd get a fraction of what you actually needed. But if we are considered as self-employed, if we are on director's payroll and we draw a dividend generally, then that would bring us into this statutory self-employment bill. So we're going to keep an eye on this and we're hoping it's going to get posted and approved today. And I expect there'll be an announcement later on this evening where Boris comes online and tells us exactly what this means to us and how we should go about it. But the one thing I would say is take a look at your businesses, reduce your costs. If you don't need to claim, the focus should be on continuing your businesses and running and building the business through this crisis rather than looking for what funds we can claim from the government, unless your income has just dried up and you're not going to be able to make it through without getting government support. So the state aid, I think, is for those that literally have no other income and everything's just ceased. And there are businesses that have done that. For at least 80% of our client businesses, most of them will continue to run in some guise with a lot of effort and a change in focus and bringing stuff online, doing things that you can do from home so that the rest of the world keeps on turning in some sort of normality. Our services and our operations and our skill sets are all still needed, but the way we deliver them just has to change a little. And I'm hoping that that's a reasonably accurate assessment and I'm not proven horribly wrong as everything all dries up, but I don't think it will.
No, I think for many people, business to a certain degree could continue almost as normal. It just depends what services they're delivering, how they can fulfill the client's
Yeah.
needs.
And a lot of the physical in-person services will just be delayed while we're in this quarantine.
Exactly. But it's
Um,
really useful because if you can continue trading as per normal or as relatively close to normal as possible, the
yeah,
less you have to rely on government funding, the better it will be in the long run. Because obviously, if everyone was to take advantage of this offering, because they are being so generous, if everyone was to take advantage of it, the repercussions are just going to unfold. And actually, it's just going to end up unwinding in more tax somewhere down the line or potential fraud claims, things like that. So there's all sorts we just need to be aware of.
yeah. So Carl is asking, what does furloughed staff mean? Who are furloughed staff? Is it that none through payroll and accountants is something we need to do? So a furloughed staff is someone who was on payroll as of 28th of February and has been effectively sent home with no work to do. So think about production lines and the whole businesses, the restaurants and people who literally have been sent home and cannot continue to work because their businesses has been closed for operations. To a
Yeah.
degree, that might be some of the electrical team that you work with, Carl. So if you've sent people home and there's nothing for them to do and they were on no wages, then you can class them as furloughed staff and you can make a claim for furloughed staff for the government to pay 80% of their average wages. Now, the system's not set up yet. We know it's going to take a couple of months to work through, and we know the first payments they're hoping to start making at the end of April. So it doesn't help for March payroll, but it will help for April payroll. So if we have individuals and if we have employees that are on the breadline and cannot feed their families, the best thing they can do is start applying for universal tax credits and see if they can get emergency funding that way. Um, I don't know what that means in terms of how they could claim for being furloughed later on. We don't have guidance on what happens in those kind of circumstances. So there will be options either way. So we need to be encouraging our staff to apply for the mortgage holidays, to not be paying loans and looking for holidays on loan repayments, on car repayments, on anything that is manageable and controllable out of their bank accounts. They should be actively looking to reduce, cut costs where they can. I mean, this is the kind of common sense advice that any of us should be looking into at the moment. Don't just assume that we can all pay everything. Take what opportunities that you have um, to reduce your monthly cash outgoings. If you can't pay something today, so for example, a mortgage, when you ring up and apply for your mortgage holiday, they're not going to stop the interest being charged on it. They're not going to not encourage you to pay that eventually. What they'll do is just stick it on to the end. They'll keep charging interest. So it's a physical cash payment holiday. It doesn't mean that you still don't owe the interest on them. They're still all charging interest as far as I'm aware. We have heard of some credit card companies that have put clients on a 0% interest rate, and in one instance I've even heard of the credit card company um, giving the card holder £100 back as a goodwill gift in these times. But that doesn't happen very often. What is happening is that if you are adversely affected by the corona crisis, and that is often the criteria, you have to be adversely affected. If you're not adversely affected and your business is continuing as normal, they're not expecting you to ask for payment holidays on your mortgage or on your loans, because you can continue to pay as normal. They're only asking staff or people that are financially affected by the virus, to ask for the extensions and the payment holidays. So Kirsten says, I've got invoices that I can issue now for work that I've done so far this year, but then the projects that I'm working on have been put on hiatus for further notice, which I guess is unsurprising. So it means that could I, many down the lines, make a claim? Yeah, I think that is a challenge. That the problem that we have is if everything is put on hold for 3 months, we're all right for 3 months, but then not for the next 3 months, although potentially we could be billing then. So I guess I would be talking to your customers to see whether you can whether they would allow you to bill them on a retention scheme. So could they retain you and pay you on retention for projects that you will deliver down the line? If they say no, then I would be applying for the mortgage holidays and the loan holidays as far as I possibly can, because although you're not in financial crisis today, you could be in 3 to 6 months' time. Now, don't spend that money if you can possibly avoid it. Put that money on one side so that you can then pay the bills later when they come into place. So it is a challenge, and it does mean that we need to be a little more creative. If our suppliers and the people that we're not paying are small businesses, I would say the same thing to them. Treat them how you would want to be treated yourself. So we've got we're in quite a few business communities where yoga studios and hairdressers and people who rely on footfall coming through the door, their businesses have literally stopped turning over. So they've taken lessons online, and what's happening is a lot of them are seeing their customers are so keen to see them keep going that their customers are paying them the money that they would have normally had for their in-person class, just to make sure that they're still there in 3 months' time, however long this is going to be, to make sure that everybody comes out of this in one piece. So, and
Yeah.
we've suggested, I suggested the same to our hairdresser. We've been with the same hairdresser, gosh, for 20 odd years. Now, I would much rather pay for my next haircut, even if I don't get one, because I want to see her in business when we come out of this. Now, hopefully, as business owners, we can all cut our costs and manage our spends accordingly and reduce what we can, take the payment holidays that we can to spread the burden over the next 3 to 6 months. Because although we might be immediately impacted for 3 months, the fallout of this is going to last another 3, 6, 9 months after that, while we try and catch up with taxes, and we catch up with our bills, and we catch up with the things that have been put on hold but haven't stopped. So there's a big difference between what's put on hold and what's being stopped in terms of bills. And the payment holidays are a good example. They're deferred, they're not stopped. So,
Yeah.
and the tax, the VAT, it's deferred, it's not stopped. So we've got to pay it eventually. We've
And
just
then
got a
that,
longer period to pay it over.
and that's exactly why we've got to be conservative with cash,
Yeah.
because we just assume the next 3 months, oh, that's okay, all of my costs are gone. And to be fair, we're not really going to be able to spend on much in the next few weeks.
I know,
But
all your entertainment costs have just gone right out the window, haven't they? Other than
But
Netflix.
the more we can set aside, the better, because when we do come out of this, there's obviously going to be not a cooling off period, but there's going to be, I'm actually going to say a warming up period, because there's going to be this patch after all this is blown over where everyone's trying to get back into the swing of things. And then that's when it's going to be most important.
Yeah, and that'll be when we're trying to catch up with things like the VAT and the income tax that we don't have to pay in July, but we still have to pay in January. So there'll be a double whammy in January 2021 as we try and catch up with almost a year's worth of payments in one go. So yeah, it is. Yeah, the way I'm looking at it, you're right, Kirsten, is that we're looking at a potential 6 month impact on our income. Now, hopefully, there's things that we can do to work around that. I think as we start working through this, people will start going back to work, although it'd be different. There's skill sets that all of us have that we can be teaching other people and we can be sharing with other people. And there are businesses that still need to turn and services that still need to be delivered. It will just be different. So with everybody stuck at home, I think there's going to be a huge boom in learning, in online learning. People are going to be bored, so they're going to want to learn a skill, learn a language, learn to do something new. If you're taking your business online, what can you do online that takes your skill set and delivers it to somebody without having to leave the house? I mean, a lot of us do this anyway. We deliver our services online or remotely. But if our clients' businesses have stopped turning or have slowed down or have changed to accommodate the current environment, then who else are our clients? Who else wants to buy what we have to offer? It's all of these kind of things that we now have to learn and get more savvy. We have to join more Facebook groups. We have to join more online communities. We have to start thinking differently about the services that we've got and how we can service more customers, because everybody now is going to be buying and selling online. So how do we do that? So interesting conundrums, I think, for all of us. So in the short term, what we are going to do, getting back to today's topic, is keep a really close eye on this bill today and see what gets amended and see whether the definition of self-employed is clarified even further, to see how this affects those of us who are director owners of our business. Those who are genuine, unlimited self-employed freelancers whose income has driven up overnight, who's gone overnight, do need to start looking as soon as possible at your average income and calculating what that is, so that as soon as the portal or whatever mechanism they release is made available, you can make your claim and protect your income.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one because it's averaged over the last 3 years. Now,
yes,
given timing, we're nearly at the end of this tax year. I wonder if they're going to take into account, say, the last 11 months, or if you have to apply based on 3 years data, not including 2020. I guess, to be fair, we don't know, because what they can't necessarily do is favour people who on the 6th of April are ready for their VAT return, for their self-assessment tax return, but then some people won't be. So it's going to be a tricky one.
Yeah, but
So I'm
maybe they will.
see what they.
Maybe that will encourage us all to be a bit more efficient with putting our tax returns in. The one of the challenges I think there's going to be is, even if we're only doing tax returns now, it's for what happens to those people that started businesses within the year. So they might have been employed through part of the year, and they might have been self-employed for 6 months. What happens if they've taken a nosedive in salary and used savings to support them for 6 months while they built their business up? What happens if somebody has been on long-term sick and they've gone back to work, and they've relied on a much higher income in the last 6 months, but prior to that it was really low. So there's so many things to consider about how this can be fair and how this needs to be apportioned or calculated, and none of those are very, very clear at the moment, because obviously what we've got here is a first draft of something that hasn't been passed yet and is so generic it will never apply to all situations. So I think we'll have lots of
Yeah,
exceptions coming out of the woodwork as this gets announced, and everybody goes, well, this doesn't apply to me, and this doesn't apply to me, and this doesn't apply to me. And
but this is why we shouldn't assume the government's forgotten anything, because there's a lot of people
exactly.
saying the government's forgotten about this group of people or that group of people. They probably, I bet money they haven't. It's
Yeah.
just more complicated than that. If it was clear cut, they would have already made a decision on it. So they're considering everyone's needs, and this bill, I think, is
they
a really classic example of that.
Yeah, I think they're trying to consider everybody's needs, but there has to be blanket, generic statements like
Yeah,
this to account for the majority, and then the minority will then have to, pipe up, and there'll be exceptions to deal with all sorts of situations. So we had the same yesterday with, they made, Boris made his announcement at 8:30 about who could and could not leave the house. And all overnight, I've been watching people complaining, well, what about me? What about me? Am I essential? Am I non essential? Am I a key
yeah,
worker? Am I not a key worker? Sports Direct
compl-
were going to open last night. They've changed their mind this morning after the entire country said, what? You are not essential workers. So
you're right.
interesting. So even when what you think is a relatively clear statement is published, it's still not going to be clear to everybody. And
No.
even this morning, my Facebook feed is full of people say, "Can I go out? Can I not go out?" No, generally no.
Yeah, the thing is, I think if you have to ask, the answer is no. I
Yeah,
think
at the
you'll know.
moment.
You need to go out, you'll know. And if you, the second you go, well, can I go? No. Should I? No. It's you should go out only when you absolutely need to, and it shouldn't be a question at all. I
Yeah,
mean, like that's my view personally.
yeah,
That's the
and
best way of
mine too. But then it's
clarifying
probably easy
it.
for us. We're accountants who spend a lot of our time in front of computers, so to us, the thought of being isolated and ring fenced and staying at home is not horrific. It just means we've got more time to focus. So maybe we're the exception to the rule. I don't know. Right, okay, so we've been talking now for half an hour, so I think they've probably heard about enough as you need to hear from us today. What we will do is update you later when we get a little bit more clarification on this, and we'll let you know what we know as soon as we know it. And we'll speak to you soon. Bye for now, everybody. Thanks for joining. Bye.